Every year around this time, we see the war on Christmas play itself out with the same sides. The anti-religious zealots on the left try to expunge Jesus from the public square to get rid of manger scenes, and people get so coward that instead of saying Merry Christmas, they say Happy Holidays or Have a nice day. On the other side, you have the conservative right in this country that feeling that their faith is being threatened and under attack from the left, and not without merit, they go out of their way to defend Christmas, not because they want to defend the pagan origins of it, because they want to defend their faith. Indeed, the president, when he was campaigning, kept saying we're going to bring back Merry Christmas. He wasn't doing that because he liked the pagan origins of it. I think he sincerely wanted to defend the Christian faith. So as I say, you have the two sides, the anti-religious zealots on the one side that tend to be anti-Christmas, and the Christian right that tends to be pro-Christmas. Well, what side should a Christian take? Should he take part on either side in that particular war? I would say no. Firstly, you have to look at the origins of Christmas. Everybody knows that the origins of Christmas and the date chosen for Christmas came from the winter solstice. Yesterday was the winter solstice. The sun is reborn after the solstice. You have the shortest day of the year, and the pagans celebrated the rebirth of the sun. If you look at the Encyclopedia Britannica, this is from britannica.com/topic/Christmas. They say this, and it's exactly right. One widespread explanation of the origin of this date, being December 25th, is that December 25 was the Christianizing of the Dies Solis Invicti Nati, or Day of the Birth of the Unconquered Sun, a popular holiday in the Roman Empire that celebrated the winter solstice as a symbol of the resurgence of the sun, the casting away of winter, and the heralding of the rebirth of spring and summer. Indeed, after December 25th had become widely accepted as the date of Jesus' birth, Christian writers frequently made the connection between the rebirth of the sun and the birth of the sun. It was easy to get pagans to accept it too. Instead of celebrating the rebirth of the sun, celebrate the birth of the Son of God. Listen to the next line, though. This is interesting. One of the difficulties with this view is that it suggests a nonchalant willingness on the part of the Christian church to appropriate a pagan festival when the early church was so intent on distinguishing itself categorically from pagan beliefs and practices. Well, that's what happened. They are nonchalant. Aren't most people today nonchalant about appropriating pagan festivals? If you study history, they certainly are. So that's the origin. Now, when was Jesus born? We can have an idea that he was probably born late September, but he couldn't have been born in December. If you go to Luke 2, verse 8, it says, "And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night." They wouldn't have been doing that in December. A clue we get as to when he was born is the fact that John the Baptist, we all know that Jesus was born 6 months after John the Baptist was. And it says in Luke 1, verse 5, that Zacharias was of the course of Abijah. If you go to 1 Chronicles 24, verse 10, that was the 8th course. I don't want to get technical and go into too big an explanation, but if you study the course of Abijah, Jesus was probably born mid to late September. At any rate, he wasn't born in December. Here's what Henry Morris says in his Bible commentary, the Defender's Study Bible. He says on Luke 2, verse 8, "It is unlikely that shepherds would be abiding in their fields in late December. Furthermore, the 70-mile journey from Nazareth to Bethlehem would probably have been too difficult for Mary in the winter. A more probable time would be late September, the time of the annual Feast of Tabernacles, when such travel was commonly accepted. Thus, it is rather commonly believed, though not certain, that Jesus' birth was around the last of September." That makes sense. If you read the companion Bible, Bullinger, it's Appendix 179, he believes that Jesus' birth was at the end of September, I think September 29th, 4 BC. At any rate, it was in December, and we can't prove for sure when it was. But we see the origins of the holiday, and clearly Christmas comes from paganism. Now, is it wrong to use pagan practices? Well, God answered that fairly straightforwardly if you go to Deuteronomy 12, verses 29 through 32. This is God speaking, not me. "When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, whither thou goest to possess them, and thou succeedest them, and dwellest in their land, take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them, after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods, saying, How did these nations serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God. For every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods. For even their sons and their daughters have they burnt in the fire to their gods. What things soever I command you, observe to do it. Thou shalt not add thereto, nor diminish from it. So we see we're not supposed to be using pagan practices. This is why a Bible-following Christian really shouldn't take part in the war on Christmas. He certainly shouldn't be with the anti-religious zealots on the left that hate Christmas for the wrong reasons, because they just have a problem with Jesus being in the public square. They're afraid of the separation of church and state, they believe. I'm not going to go into that, but they have an animus towards public displays of Christianity. It's hard to argue with that. And I'm not going to side with the pro-Christmas Christians on the right, because the origins of the holiday are not in the Bible. They come from solstice celebrations. Finally, green trees were commonly used for fertility symbols in ancient pagan cults. If you want some references you could see in the Bible that refers to green trees and condemns their use, you could look at Isaiah 57 verse 5, Jeremiah 3 verses 6 and 13, 2 Chronicles 28:4, Deuteronomy 12 verse 2, 1 Kings 14 verse 23, 2 Kings 16 verse 4, 2 Kings 17 verse 10, Jeremiah 2 verse 20, Jeremiah 17 verse 2, Ezekiel 6 verse 13. All these verses refer to green trees, and not in a favorable light. They were fertility symbols. Finally, let me close with this, and this sounds awfully familiar, as I've said before, and you could picture Burl Ives singing Silver and Gold for those of us old enough to remember that. Jeremiah 10, verses 1 through 5. Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven. For the heathen are dismayed at them, for the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workman with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not. They are upright as the palm tree, but speak not. They must needs be born, because they cannot go. Be not afraid of them, for they cannot do evil, neither also is it in them to do good. So not trying to be offensive, but as I say, if you look at the origins, what the Bible says about using pagan practices, then I will abstain from taking a side on the war on Christmas this year. Goodbye.